A loyal dog growling at the same corner every night might seem odd, but what if it was a warning? For Jack and Emma, their German Shepherd Max wasn't just acting strange, he was trying to save their family from an unseen danger. Come to an end, what happens next is both terrifying and heartwarming. But first, make sure you're subscribed to the channel to catch more incredible stories of bravery, loyalty, and the special bond between pets and their families, just like this one. Jack stood in the nursery doorway, his brow furrowed as he watched Max, their 5-year-old German Shepherd, growl softly at the far corner of the room. Max's ears were pinned back, and his sharp eyes stayed locked on the spot as if it held some invisible threat. The room itself was quiet, bathed in the soft golden light of sunset streaming through the windows. Baby Luke was fast asleep in his crib, his tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. "Jack, is Max at it again?" Emma's voice broke his concentration. She appeared behind him, holding a folded blanket. Her face reflected a mixture of concern and confusion. "Yeah," Jack replied, not taking his eyes off Max. "He's been like this every night for the past 2 weeks. I can't figure it out." Max had been their loyal companion for years, ever since they adopted him from a local shelter. The dog had always been gentle and protective, especially around children. When Luke was born 3 months ago, Max had taken to him immediately, lying beside his crib during naps and greeting every coo and babble with a wag of his tail. But this sudden behavior, this nightly growling, was new and unsettling. "Maybe he's anxious," Emma suggested. She draped the blanket over the rocking chair and joined Jack. "It could be all the changes with the baby. Dogs feel things we don't." Jack crossed his arms. "Maybe, but it's always the same corner. He doesn't growl during the day, only at night. And he never acts aggressive, just alert, like he's guarding something." Emma stepped into the room, crouching beside Max. She scratched behind his ears, but the dog's posture didn't relax. Instead, Max's growl deepened slightly, his attention never wavering from the corner. "Could it be a mouse, or maybe something outside the house?" Emma asked, looking up at Jack. "I checked the windows. They're sealed tight. No holes, no cracks, and there's no sound outside. It's just weird." Jack ran a hand through his hair, frustration creeping into his voice. Emma sighed. "Maybe we should have him checked out at the vet, just in case something's wrong." The following day, Jack took Max to the local veterinarian. Dr. Carter, a cheerful woman with a calm demeanor, gave Max a thorough examination. She checked his ears, his teeth, and even ran tests to rule out any underlying health issues. "Well, Max is perfectly healthy," Dr. Carter said, patting the dog's head. "Sometimes dogs pick up on things we don't. Subtle changes in the environment, unusual sounds, or even shifts in air pressure. Whatever's bothering him might not be something you can see or hear." Jack left the clinic feeling both relieved and puzzled. If Max wasn't sick, then what was causing his behavior? He resolved to keep a closer eye on him. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Max resumed his vigil. He sat near the crib, his body tense, his growl barely audible but persistent. Jack pulled a chair into the nursery and sat down, determined to observe Max more closely. Baby Luke stirred in his sleep, his tiny fingers twitching as he dreamed. Jack leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "What is it, Max? What's bothering you?" Max didn't respond, his focus glued to the corner. Jack followed the dog's gaze but saw nothing out of the ordinary, just the soft yellow walls and a few scattered toys. Yet something about Max's intensity unsettled him. As the night wore on, Jack began to notice small details he hadn't before. A faint draft seemed to emanate from the corner, barely strong enough to move the baby mobile hanging above the crib. He got up and walked over, running his hand along the wall. It felt cool to the touch, and he thought he detected a subtle vibration. "Emma," he called softly. She appeared moments later, rubbing her eyes. "What is it?" "Come here," Jack said, beckoning her. "Feel this." Emma placed her hand on the wall, her brow furrowing. "There's a draft. That's odd." Jack nodded. And it's coming from the corner Max has been growling at. Emma glanced at Max, who was now sitting upright, his ears perked and his growl steady. Do you think there's something wrong with the house? Like a structural issue? Jack considered her words. Their home was old, built in the 1950s, and had likely weathered its fair share of storms and repairs. It's possible. I'll call a home inspector tomorrow. The next morning, Jack called a local inspection service. The soonest appointment was 3 days away, which felt like an eternity given Max's continued behavior. In the meantime, Emma decided to ask their neighbor, Margaret, if she'd noticed anything unusual about their houses. Margaret, an elderly woman who had lived in the neighborhood for over 40 years, was quick to offer insight. "Oh, honey, these old houses always have surprises," she said with a chuckle. "I had water damage in my walls last year, didn't even know until the smell started. Have you checked for leaks?" Emma returned home with a thoughtful expression. "Margaret mentioned water damage. Could that be it?" "It's possible," Jack said, "but why would Max react to it unless—" He trailed off, a thought forming in his mind. Dogs had incredible senses, far beyond human perception. If there was something hidden in the walls, water, pests, or even structural instability, Max might be picking up on it. That night, Jack stayed up late, determined to uncover more clues. As he sat in the nursery, Max continued his low growl, his eyes never leaving the corner. Jack used a flashlight to examine the walls, noticing faint hairline cracks branching out from the baseboard. When he pressed his hand against the wall, the vibration was more noticeable than before. "This isn't normal," he muttered. By the time the home inspector arrived, Jack was convinced something was wrong. Max had been relentless in his warnings, and Jack was determined to get to the bottom of it. As the inspector unpacked his tools, Max stood nearby, watching intently. "Your dog seems pretty interested in this corner," the inspector noted with a chuckle. Jack nodded. "He's been growling at it for weeks. That's why I called you." "Well, let's see what's going on," the inspector said. Jack barely slept that night, his mind turning over the strange draft and vibration in the nursery wall. Max's persistent growls had unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Jack paced the house the next morning, frustrated by the fact that the home inspector wouldn't arrive for another 3 days. His gut told him something was wrong, something that couldn't wait. "I'm going to check under the house," Jack announced to Emma as he pulled on his work gloves. Emma looked up from cradling baby Luke, her brow furrowed. "Are you sure that's a good idea? The crawl space isn't exactly inviting." "It's the only thing I can do right now," Jack said firmly. "If there's water damage or a structural issue, I want to know." Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Just be careful," she said, adding with a wry smile. "And watch out for spiders." The crawl space was as unpleasant as Jack had anticipated. Armed with a flashlight, he maneuvered through the narrow, dimly lit area beneath the house. The scent of earth and mildew was strong, and cobwebs brushed against his face, making him grimace. His flashlight beam illuminated the wooden beams that formed the foundation of their home. As he moved closer to the section beneath the nursery, something caught his attention. One of the support beams had a darker, discolored patch near its base. He shone his flashlight on it, leaning in closer. The wood looked damp, with faint streaks running down its surface. When he pressed his hand against the beam, it felt soft, almost spongy. "Definitely not good," Jack muttered under his breath. The discovery deepened his concern. There was no visible leak, but the dampness was enough to suggest trouble. He carefully retreated from the crawl space and emerged into the daylight, brushing dirt from his jeans. Emma was waiting for him on the porch, holding Luke and looking anxious. "Well?" she asked. "There's some moisture under the house, and it's right beneath the nursery," Jack explained. "I couldn't see any leaks, but it's not normal. I'm not touching anything else until the inspector comes." Emma frowned. "Do you think it's dangerous?" "Not immediately," Jack replied. "But we shouldn't take any chances." Later that day, Emma decided to visit their elderly neighbor, Margaret. She had mentioned water damage during their last conversation, and Emma hoped to learn more. Margaret was in her garden, carefully pruning a rosebush when Emma arrived. "Morning, dear," Margaret greeted warmly. "What brings you by?" Emma hesitated. "I wanted to ask about that water damage you mentioned. Was it on the wall near our nursery?" Margaret nodded thoughtfully. "Oh yes, right along the shared wall. It happened after that big storm last year. The gutters overflowed and water got in. We had to replace some drywall." Emma felt a pang of unease. "Did you notice anything strange before you found the damage?" Margaret chuckled. "Well, my cat wouldn't go near that wall for weeks. She'd hiss at it. I figured it was a mouse or something. You know how animals are. They notice things we don't." Emma thanked Margaret and returned home, her mind racing. If Margaret's cat had reacted to water damage, Max's behavior might be pointing to something even more serious. That evening, as the sun set, Max's routine began again. The German Shepherd paced between the nursery door and the far corner, his growls deep and persistent. Jack decided to set up a chair in the nursery and observe him more closely. Emma joined him, carrying a notebook to jot down anything unusual. "Look at him," Jack said softly, watching Max. "It's like he's guarding Luke." Emma nodded. "His growls are louder tonight. Do you think it's the draft again?" Jack leaned against the crib, folding his arms. "It might be. The house is cooler now than it was during the day. Maybe the temperature drop is affecting something in the wall." As if to confirm Jack's theory, the faint draft stirred the baby mobile above Luke's crib, making it twirl gently. Max's growls deepened, his ears twitching at the faint sound. Jack crouched beside the dog and placed a reassuring hand on his back. "You're a good boy, Max," Jack murmured. "You're looking out for us, huh?" Max wagged his tail briefly, but didn't take his eyes off the corner. Jack was determined to uncover more. That night, he stayed up in the nursery with Max, armed with a flashlight and notepad. Around midnight, the draft became more pronounced, accompanied by a faint whistling sound. "Emma," Jack called softly. His wife appeared moments later, rubbing her eyes. "Do you hear that?" Emma tilted her head, listening intently. "It sounds like whistling." Jack nodded. "It's coming from the wall. Feel this." He pressed her hand against the wall, where a faint vibration pulsed beneath the surface. Emma pulled her hand back, her face pale. What could be causing that? Jack shook his head. Water, maybe, or the house settling. Whatever it is, it's not normal. Max let out a low whine and stepped in front of them, positioning himself protectively. His growl was steady, but his posture radiated tension. Jack knelt beside Max, running a hand over his fur. "We're going to figure this out, buddy. Just hang in there." The next morning, Jack and Emma decided not to take any chances. They moved Luke's crib into their bedroom, setting it up near their bed. Max followed closely, his protective instincts unwavering. "I'll feel better with him here," Emma said, tucking a blanket around Luke, "at least until we know what's going on." Jack nodded, tightening the screws on the crib. "It's the right move. Max seems calmer already." Indeed, Max settled near the crib, his tail wagging softly. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't growling. Instead, he lay down with his head on his paws, his amber eyes half closed. "Maybe he feels better knowing Luke's safe," Emma said, smiling. "Or maybe he knows help is coming," Jack replied. As they prepared for the home inspector's visit, Jack and Emma felt a mix of anxiety and relief. Whatever was causing the strange sounds and drafts, they were one step closer to uncovering the truth. The morning of the home inspection arrived with a mix of anticipation and unease. Jack had spent the previous night preparing a detailed list of everything unusual they'd noticed: drafts, vibrations, noises, and most importantly, Max's behavior. As the inspector's truck pulled into the driveway, Max, the family's German Shepherd, rose to his feet. His ears perked up and he trotted to the door. tail wagging slightly but with his usual air of alertness. "Thanks for coming so quickly," Jack said, shaking the inspector's hand. The man introduced himself as Mr. Hayes, a calm, methodical professional in his 50s. "No problem," Hayes replied, setting down his tool bag. "Old houses like this can have plenty of surprises. Let's get started." Inside the nursery, Hayes began his inspection by running his hands along the walls, tapping them gently as he listened for hollow sounds. Max followed him closely, sitting near the crib and watching every move. "This the corner you mentioned?" Hayes asked, gesturing to the spot where Max had been growling. Jack nodded. "That's the one. The draft always comes from there, and at night, we hear faint whistling." Hayes pulled out a moisture meter and ran it along the wall. The device beeped sharply, confirming elevated moisture levels. He crouched near the baseboards and shined his flashlight, revealing a faint dark line where the wall met the floor. "You've got water getting in here," Hayes said, straightening up. "I'll need to check the exterior wall." Max let out a soft whine, and Hayes glanced at the dog. "You know, dogs can be better than any instrument we use. They pick up on things long before we notice them." Jack crouched beside Max, scratching behind his ears. "You hear that, buddy? You're doing a great job." Max wagged his tail once but kept his eyes locked on the corner. Outside, Hayes examined the wall directly behind the nursery. He pointed to the gutter above, which sagged slightly. "That's your culprit," he said. "It's clogged, causing water to overflow and seep into the wall." Jack frowned. "Wouldn't that only happen during storms?" Hayes nodded. "That's when it started. But once water gets into the structure, it takes time to dry out, if it dries out at all. Over time, the moisture weakens the materials." Hayes then examined the foundation. The crawlspace entrance creaked as he opened it, and Max instinctively positioned himself nearby, watching intently. "Let's check underneath," Hayes said, ducking into the crawlspace. Jack followed, shining his own flashlight on the beams supporting the nursery. "Here we go," Hayes said, pointing to one of the beams. The wood was visibly discolored, and when Hayes pressed it with a screwdriver, it gave way slightly. "This beam is compromised. The water damage has started to rot the wood." Jack's stomach tightened. "Is it dangerous?" "Not immediately," Hayes replied. "But if this isn't addressed soon, the structure could fail. It's good you caught this now." Returning to the nursery, Hayes continued his inspection. "These vibrations you mentioned, they're likely caused by the weakened beam shifting under the house's weight. And the whistling sound, that's air moving through the damaged areas as the house cools at night." Emma appeared in the doorway holding baby Luke. "So it's all connected?" she asked. "Exactly," Hayes said. "Your dog sensed these changes before they became obvious. He's been trying to protect you." Emma looked down at Max, her expression softening. "Good boy," she said, crouching to pat his head. Max wagged his tail, finally relaxing slightly now that someone was addressing the issue. That afternoon, Jack called a contractor recommended by Hayes. Within hours, 2 workers arrived to assess the damage further. They brought specialized tools and began carefully removing sections of drywall in the nursery. Max stayed close, lying near the crib but keeping a watchful eye on the workers. "Yep, this beam is in bad shape," one of the workers said as he examined the exposed wood. "And there's mold in here too. Not enough to be a health hazard yet, but it needs to be dealt with." Jack and Emma watched anxiously as the workers documented the damage. "You're lucky this didn't collapse," the lead contractor said. "We'll replace the beam, treat the mold, and seal the exterior wall. It'll take a few days, but we'll get it done." By the time the workers left that evening, the nursery looked like a construction zone. Plastic sheeting covered the exposed areas, and tools were neatly stacked in one corner. Max sniffed at the changes but didn't growl. His demeanor had shifted now that the danger was being addressed. As Jack and Emma tucked Luke into his temporary crib in their bedroom, they couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. Max lay at the foot of the bed, his tail wagging softly as Emma leaned down to pet him. "You saved us, Max," she said. "You knew something was wrong, and you didn't give up." Jack nodded, watching the dog settle down with a contented sigh. "We owe him big time," he said. As the house grew quiet for the night, Jack and Emma felt a newfound appreciation for their loyal companion. Max had not only alerted them to a serious problem, but had also kept them safe in ways they were only beginning to understand. The morning was quiet, but the house buzzed with activity. Jack and Emma had moved baby Luke's crib into their bedroom the night before, and Max had settled beside it, as if knowing his job of guarding the nursery wasn't over yet. Now the contractors were back, ready to begin the arduous process of repairing the damaged beam, sealing the wall, and ensuring the house was safe again. "Morning," Greg, the lead contractor, greeted as he carried a toolbox into the nursery. "We'll start with the beam. Once that's secure, we'll handle the mold and seal up the exterior wall." Jack nodded, watching as Greg and his team spread plastic sheeting across the floor and began setting up their equipment. Max trotted into the nursery and immediately took his usual spot near the crib, watching the workers intently. Emma chuckled from the doorway. "Looks like Max isn't ready to retire just yet." Jack smiled. "He's not leaving his post until everything's back to normal." The first breakthrough. As the workers carefully removed the damaged drywall, they uncovered the full extent of the problem. The rotted beam stretched farther than they'd expected, and pockets of black mold clung to the interior surfaces. "Take a look at this," Greg called out to Jack. This section was barely holding together. Jack crouched beside him, examining the beam. The wood was soft to the touch, crumbling slightly as Greg poked it with a screwdriver. "How much longer would it have lasted?" Jack asked, his voice tense. "Not long," Greg replied grimly. "A heavy storm or even shifting weight could have caused a collapse. You're lucky we're catching this now." Max let out a low whine as if understanding the gravity of the situation. He moved closer to Jack and nudged his leg with his nose. "You've got a smart dog," Greg said with a grin. "I'd take him on any job as my inspector." A hidden danger revealed. That afternoon, as the contractors removed more of the damaged wall, they found something even more troubling: an exposed electrical conduit. The wires inside were frayed, likely from years of water seeping into the wall. "Jack," Greg said, motioning him over, "we've got a bigger issue here. This wiring's a fire hazard." Jack's stomach churned as he looked at the damaged conduit. "How bad is it?" "It's serious," Greg replied. "This could have sparked a fire, especially with the mold and moisture acting as conductors. We'll need to call in an electrician to replace this." Emma entered the room holding Luke and immediately noticed the concern on Jack's face. "What's wrong?" "The wiring's damaged," Jack explained. "Could have caused a fire." Emma's grip on Luke tightened. "I don't even want to think about what could have happened." Max, sensing Emma's distress, moved to her side and pressed his head against her leg. She knelt down, stroking his fur. "Good boy, Max. You've been protecting us this whole time." Max's new role. As the repairs progressed, Max's demeanor shifted. He no longer growled or paced, but instead followed the workers closely, his amber eyes observing every move. It was as if he had taken on the role of supervisor, ensuring that every task was done correctly. The workers grew fond of him, often pausing to scratch behind his ears or toss him a treat. "I've worked a lot of jobs," Greg said, chuckling, "but this is the first time I've had a canine quality inspector." Emma smiled as she watched Max wag his tail at the attention. "He's always been protective of us, but this is next level. I think he knows the house is being fixed." Jack agreed, watching Max circle the room and sniff at the repaired areas before lying down in his usual spot by the crib. "He won't rest until he's sure we're safe." The turning point. By the end of the second day, the contractors had replaced the rotted beam with a new, sturdy one. The mold was treated, and the damaged wiring was replaced by an electrician. The house felt different now, safer, more solid. Greg called Jack and Emma into the nursery as his team packed up their tools. "We're done here," he said with a satisfied smile. The structural issues are fixed, the mold's gone, and the walls sealed. Your house is secure now." Emma let out a sigh of relief, holding Luke close. "Thank you, Greg. I don't even want to think about what could have happened if we'd ignored this." Greg nodded. "You should thank Max. He probably saved your lives." Max wandered into the room, his tail wagging as he sniffed the newly repaired wall. He flopped down in his usual spot, his posture relaxed for the first time in weeks. Jack knelt beside him, scratching behind his ears. "You're amazing, buddy. We couldn't have done this without you." A quiet evening. That evening, the house was quiet for the first time in what felt like forever. Luke slept soundly in his crib, back in the nursery. Max lay nearby, his head resting on his paws, his eyes half closed in contentment. The faint draft and vibrations were gone, replaced by a comforting stillness. Jack and Emma stood in the doorway, watching Max and Luke. "It feels different now," Emma said softly. "Safer." Jack nodded. "And Max agrees. Look at him. He's finally at peace." As they turned out the light and headed to bed, Max let out a contented sigh, his job as the family's guardian complete, for now. The house was finally quiet. For weeks the family had lived amidst the chaos of repairs and the constant worry of hidden dangers. But now, the danger had passed. The nursery was fully restored, the soft yellow walls freshly painted, the crib returned to its rightful place, and the baby mobile spinning gently in the absence of drafts. Jack and Emma stood in the doorway, their hearts full of gratitude and relief. Max lay near the crib, his posture relaxed and calm for the first time in weeks. He watched Luke sleep, his ears twitching slightly, as if still listening for anything out of place. Jack leaned against the doorframe, smiling down at the dog. "It feels different now," Jack said quietly. "Safer." Emma nodded, holding a freshly laundered blanket. "Max agrees. Look at him. He's not pacing, no growling. He knows everything's okay." A fresh start. That morning, Greg and his team had finished sealing the exterior wall and repairing the damaged gutters. The entire house felt renewed, the air fresher without the hidden mold. Emma had spent the afternoon putting the nursery back together. She carefully arranged Luke's toys, smoothed out the crib sheets, and hung soft curtains over the window. As she worked, Max followed her, his nose inspecting every corner of the room. He sniffed the new beam in the wall, his tail wagging gently as he seemed to approve of the repairs. "You're a tough boss," Emma joked, scratching behind Max's ears, "but I'm glad you're happy." Max's legacy. By evening, the family had settled back into their normal routine. Jack prepared dinner while Emma rocked Luke to sleep in the nursery. Max, ever the vigilant protector, sat beside her, his amber eyes soft but watchful. "You've been amazing, Max," Emma said softly, stroking his fur. "I don't know what we would have done without you." As if understanding her words, Max nuzzled her hand before lying down at her feet. His steady breathing was a comforting presence in the room. A final inspection. Later that night, Jack walked into the nursery to check on Luke. He found Max lying near the crib, his head resting on his paws, completely at ease. Jack crouched beside him and placed a hand on his back. "You did good, buddy," Jack said quietly. "You saved us." Max's tail thumped softly against the floor, his eyes half closing in contentment. Jack stayed there for a moment, listening to the peaceful sounds of the house, the gentle hum of the heater, Luke's soft breathing, and the reassuring presence of Max. A new normal. The next morning, the family gathered in the nursery, sunlight streaming through the window. Emma held Luke as he babbled happily, his tiny hands reaching out toward Max. The dog sat patiently, allowing Luke to grab his fur with his chubby fingers. Jack snapped a picture of the moment, laughing as Luke squealed with delight. "You two are quite the pair," he said. As the day wore on, Max followed the family around the house, his protective instincts never fully fading. Though the danger had passed, he remained their guardian, always watching, always ready. Closing reflections. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack and Emma sat together in the living room. Max lay at their feet, his eyes half closed, his body fully relaxed. "You know," Emma began, her voice thoughtful, "we always knew Max was special. But now? He's a hero." Jack nodded, his gaze fixed on the dog. "He saved us from something we couldn't even see. I'll never doubt his instincts again." As the house settled into the peaceful rhythm of the night, Max let out a contented sigh. His family was safe, his job complete, for now.